Hello, friends. I am Chevee. Welcome to my shed. How are you today? How's life in your world? How's things where you are? I hope it's fantastic. I hope everything is amazing. Everything here is great. And I have the Kindle again today because I finished at lunchtime today. I finished 110 Soldier, 110. Just forgot the name of the book. I finished the last book in Chris Tolbane's The Murder of Crow series, titled 110 Soldier, a post-apocalyptic superhero novel. Oh boy, to unpack this one. As I mentioned in the previous two reviews, if you were reading them, the first one I complained a little bit about the lack. It's called a post-apocalyptic superhero adventure, whatever story. And in the first book, you don't really get the sense of the apocalypse. Like, you understand that this thing happened and the world's not what it is. But as Chris moves you swiftly from the beginning to the college, you don't really get a sense of the abandoned world. You don't really get it. Like, they still have electricity and the internet and, superheroes and there's news and, it's just life, right? You get the sense, in my head, I saw those like nice clean comic book panels of kids in kid clothes going to classes and just being normal. It wasn't like it was some apocalypse. That is completely not the case in this book. In the second book, I said that Chris, the author is Chris Tolbane, by the way. Chris ramps the pacing up in book 2, and I meant to say something along the lines of, so here's the thing. When you're reading a lot of I don't want to say non-edited, that's not fair. When you're reading a lot of self-published authors who don't have alpha and beta readers, maybe editors or whatever, there's one quality that people, you'll find a lot, and that is they constantly, like every chapter, the main character has to overcome a new problem. And it's kind of like, come on, like this is not how things work out. Like, there needs to be breaks in the pacing. There needs to be downtime. And I said, and so what I was trying to convey in book 2 was that there wasn't a lot of downtime because Chris was tackling this main character, Damien the Walker, on 3 different fronts. He was tackling him on the physical front, like his physical form, literally his body. He was tackling him on an emotional front, like who he is in relationship to the world around him, and he was tackling him on a social front. And so Damien was facing 3 different conflicts the entirety of book 2. And so the pacing was good, even though, yes, Damien was facing like a new challenge every chapter, or not really every chapter. Chris writes like really short chapters, so it was like every other chapter. That is also out the window in this book. I don't want to say that this book regresses, because there's an important reason why every page turn Damien finds himself in a new shitstorm situation. There's a good reason for it, and that's his power, right? So book 3 is a very big departure from the previous 2 books. It is almost a Western, right? At the beginning of the book, Damien volunteers to go march off into the Badlands and help people, and that's what this book is. They're riding horses and covered wagons from barely fortified town to barely fortified town, trying to help people there, and all along the way, everything goes wrong. They get attacked by giant animals, giant spiders. Damien faces down some of the biggest, most fearful villains of all time. Just every single, every chapter is just, he's getting beat to death. But it's important because it's what fuels his power, right? And we learn that he we learn directly through some conversations that he has that he gains his power broadens, the depth of his power broadens the more he's surrounded by death. Okay? And I would assume, like, Chris never really says this because this is a first person story. You're never really in the mind of anybody else. He never really says that, it maybe light bringers, for instance, which is what he calls like the energy users who can shoot beams of light. Maybe their power increases through literally just spending time in the sun or whatever. I'm assuming that's the case since, death energy is expanded by being around death. It's kind of like working out. He's working out his death muscles. And he does a whole lot of that. And he becomes super major badass to the point that it's just ridiculous how badass Damien is by the end of this book. I did tell you in part 2 this is an anti-hero story, or maybe even part 1. This is an anti-hero story. This is not a story of a good guy going off to save the world. This is the story of a inherently, I don't want to say evil person, but this is a story of a person who doesn't have, who is dealt a disadvantage of being this necromantic power, trying to not give in to that power, trying to be a good person, trying to be great. And by the end of the book, so all this time, through 3 books of this series, Walker, Damien, the main character, has been telling you he's garbage. He's really done some bad shit. And that was the build-up. And the payoff is, yeah. I mean, it was a very quick payoff. I'd say my only real criticism of this book is that final payoff of Damien doing bad was really quick. It was like 2 pages. It wasn't a whole lot. And that's a really mean criticism to level because I don't really know that you could have stretched that out. I don't know that could be stretched out to be like a whole chapter or anything. But it was a pretty quick whoa, right? Followed by, Damien's downfall, basically. Damien's downfall is the arc. That's kind of the whole point. He fought it as long as he could, kind of thing. And the ending, I'm going to say the last chapter felt right. It felt like this is the end of Damien's story, and I welled up a little bit at it. I was a little bit emotional about it, and it was like, all along we were hoping that he was wrong, right? All along you're hoping that maybe this guy really can overcome this thing. And what he finds out is maybe it's not up to him. Maybe it's just not. And so I welled up a little bit at that because it was kind of like, I think we all have a little bit of that darkness inside of us that we have to battle. And it was Chris took that and turned it up to 11 and put it in your face and said, this poor kid has been just beaten his entire life, literally. And he's still trying. He's still walking forward every day, trying to not be the person that destiny says he's going to become. And so that downfall is bittersweet. It was a very, very good ending. It was a very good wrap up of that character's story, along with the other main character that came along this whole adventure with him. I will tell you that there's one of the characters from the previous books that sticks with him through this whole book, and she was there for the ending, and it felt right. And then Chris wrote an epilogue, and I will tell you, I openly cried when I read the last part of the epilogue. It was a really emotional moment. I just felt so in tune with these characters. So not only Damien's character, like, yes, Damien's character is I felt really moved by his former lover. I felt really moved by his best friend Silt, like these 2 female powers who supported him through everything, just damn, dude. Like, it was a really moving moment. So, I can absolutely tell you that this series, all 3 books, are phenomenal, and you should read them. If you're looking for superhero fantasy, if you're looking for post-apocalyptic fantasy, if you're looking just for fantasy or just a damn good read, it's all in this series. All of the stuff I said about, looking through the eyes of a teenager so there's horniness and dick jokes and maybe a little bit of misogyny in the first book. The one thing that really sets this apart for me is that Chris was able to give us 3 different versions of Walker, of Damien, as he moved through this story. He was able to give us that immature, bro in the first book. He was able to pivot that to a more thoughtful, reserved, person trying to figure out his ways and still not sure of himself. And then in the third book, he was able to give this character confidence and power and let him stand on his own. And it felt really, really good as a reader following that character. And I think that when I said yesterday that book 2, or said the other day, it wasn't yesterday, a couple days ago, that book 2s tend to struggle with that lack of character development. I think that we got to see Damien have 3 distinct internal arcs, internal changes, one from each book, and that really worked, and it pulled at my strings. It was a very good ending. I have also read on Chris's blog that he is writing a standalone based on the Queen of Smiles, which is one of the main side characters in this series. Really interested in that. And there's also a couple of short stories I'm going to go read shortly. And maybe another series. So I don't know. I think that his writing style is fantastic. I think he has a very good grasp of storytelling. I think that there was, in 3 books about superheroes, 3 books about anything you could imagine happening, there was only one moment where I went, what? And that was the end of this book. And so this is a spoiler. I don't know how much of a spoiler it is to you, but let's just say at the end of the book, Damien is chasing down a character who is trying to escape. And that character has a teleporter on his team. And that teleporter teleported away from the battle that they were in, out into a field. And now this dude who's trying to escape is trying to get to his teleporter. And Damien is chasing him on a horse. It was the only moment where I was like, why didn't she just teleport over to the guy? Like, why is she making him run across this field? It was the only moment where I was just like, okay. I'm just going to let that one off as saying, that's fine. Like, I don't care. It was a good chase scene. It was a very good sequence. It gave a little bit of gravity to that final act. And it ultimately didn't matter. It worked out fine. Like, he could have written that couple of paragraphs any other way, and it would have been just fine. Maybe she wasn't standing in the field. Maybe she teleported somewhere where she couldn't see what was going on or whatever, and that was just their rendezvous point or whatever. It didn't matter. It worked fine. It was just, that's the one thing. So, that's where I'm going to stop. Very good series. Definitely recommend. It's on Kindle Unlimited. I think there's paperbacks available also for not a whole lot. I'll put links in the description. Thank you for being here as always. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, being amazing friends and wonderful people. I really appreciate you. And I'll see you again tomorrow. So, today's word you should know to sound smart is nonagenarian. It is a noun meaning a person in his or her 90s. When you are a nonagenarian, it begins to occur to you that you could, in fact, live to be 100. Nonagenarian. Nonagenarian. My aunt was a nonagenarian. My great aunt was a nonagenarian. And I would like to see that, especially since M is so much younger than me.